Have you ever really analyzed what you've been watching? I hadn't until I had to for this assignment. When I heard I could make a video about anything, and I would have to relate the topic to a real life issue, the first piece of media that popped in my head was the anime Attack on Titan. The anime/manga entitled Attack on Titan over here in the West, but called Shingeki no Kyojin, which translates to The Attacking Giant, was written and illustrated by Hajime Isayama. This is a story about how freedom is something you have to fight for, and in the end, you might not even get to achieve true freedom. It's about how the never-ending cycles of war can drive people to do insane things for their freedom, like wiping out 80% of the population. Although the story talks about big monsters and man-eating 15-meter titans, it does tackle some very real and hard-hitting topics such as overreaching and governmental control over citizens and keeping knowledge from these citizens of the outside world. And if you do have knowledge of the outside world, getting executed for knowing this knowledge. Another form of governmental control that is shown in the anime and manga are races being confined to zones and not letting them have certain freedoms because of their race. These forms of government have a ton of control that can take away a lot of freedoms from citizens and overall harm the citizens in either physical or mental ways that we will talk about later. The forms of governmental control in Attack on Titan are very similar to other countries we've seen and are currently using. For example, people's knowledge of the outside world being cut off. In the first season of Attack on Titan, we see one of our main characters, Armin Arlert, talking about his grandma and grandpa. Armin was talking about how his grandparents had a book of the outside world. Our other protagonist, named Eren Yeager, asked him if there are allowed materials of the outside world, implying that anything proving the outside world isn't in ruins like they were led to believe is strictly prohibited. In an article written by Robert R. King entitled North Koreans Want External Information, but Kim Jong-un Seeks to Limit Access, he states, "The information landscape in the North is tightly controlled. In the North, not only is listening to foreign radio or television broadcasts a severely punished crime, it is illegal to even own or possess a radio or television set capable of being tuned to any other station other than the official North Korean media. Access to the internet is simply not available to North Korean citizens, although very few trusted individuals and security agencies have access to the international internet. For North Koreans, there is only an internet whose content is carefully monitored and controlled by the regime." This parallels the show, which depicts multiple times where the military police, which is the police force in the show, isn't afraid to kill people to silence them for knowing the king's secrets. Just like how the North Korean government isn't scared to kill people or to put them in work camps for the rest of their life just for having access to foreign media. In the show, we also see two different countries put whole races and groups of people behind walls and in cages. We see the Marlians put every Eldian into internment zones because they are seen as second-class citizens. We also see that the king erected 3 50-meter tall walls to keep his people in and not let them know about the outside world. In the third season of the show, we see a glimpse into Grisha Jaeger's childhood, Aaron's father. We see him and his sister walking out of their internment zone without a permit to go watch a blimp take off. When they get there, they see 2 guards, but the guards don't notice that they are Eldians and don't belong on the outside. When the guards finally do notice that they ask them for the permission to get outside the walls, and they said they don't have one, and Grisha begs them not to hurt his sister, and he said it was his fault, so he should take all the punishment. So the guard ruthlessly beats Grisha, and the other officer takes his sister away. Later, her corpse is found in the river, beaten and bitten by the police dog they have. This scene shows how ruthless the Marlian police can be towards even an Eldian child trying to have fun. This reminds me of how ruthless the Nazis were to people of Jewish descent in World War II. In the 1930s and 40s, the Nazi political party was ruled over by a man named Adolf Hitler. This man had the belief that the Aryan race was the best and above all others. He wanted to wipe out anyone who didn't follow his guidelines of the perfect human, aka being 100% Aryan with blonde hair and blue eyes. This included all other minorities. Despite him not being 100% Aryan and not sharing any of his perfect human traits, in an article written by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum entitled Nazi Camps speak of a very similar topic to something we spoke about in the show. It states, concentration camps are often inaccurately compared to a prison in modern society, but concentration camps, unlike prisons, were independent of any judicial review. Nazi concentration camps served 3 main purposes: to incarcerate real and perceived enemies of the state. These persons were incarcerated for an indefinite amount of time. To eliminate individuals and small targeted groups of individuals by murder away from the public judicial review. To exploit forced labor of prisoner population. This purpose grew out of a labor shortage. These are the same reasons the Eldians in the show kept the Eldians in the camp, to keep them working and slaves to them. We know this because during the scene, Grisha asks if the guard can only punish him. They ask him if he wants to work or be punished. In this section of the video, I will be discussing the effects that governmental control have on the people, on their physical and mental health. In this show, we see numerous moments where the main character, Aaron, has breakdowns because he can't take being behind the walls any longer. During the reign of Sapa Murat of Turkmenistan, the population also faced terrible health effects because of this high level of governmental control. In this clip, Aaron says that he believes humanity has been turned into cattle, and the police officer admits that a lot of people say that they are freeloading and don't do much. This is something else that people do when under the control of a dictatorship. They start to disbelieve in the police or military. In this scene, Aaron is having a breakdown because living behind the walls his whole life, and he's been wanting to escape, and he feels useless because he can't help anyone because he's just a kid. In an article by Bernard Michel and Martin McKee, they talk about the effects of dictatorships on their citizens. In the article, they state, in 2003, 58% of the population were estimated to live below the national poverty line. The official unemployment rate is 0, as the state guarantees employment for every Turkmen citizen. However, surveys indicate that de facto unemployment is growing, especially young. Only 55% of the population is believed to have access to safe drinking water, a figure declining to 24% in rural areas. And 8% of the population was estimated to be undernourished in 2000. This quote shows how governmental control can affect its people mentally, but also physically, because they might not be getting enough resources after all. The government could be purposely keeping them weak or force them to ration out food to keep them weak. After analyzing one small part of this show, what other forms of media stand out to you and begin to make you think? Governmental control can have huge effects on people and their lives in both the physical and mental sense, whether that be in the sense of keeping them weak, from keeping them away from food, or keeping them in poverty. Attack on Titan was a show about freedoms and the fight to get them, whether it was about fighting an oppressive government or an endless war between two countries because of one person 2,000 years ago. These lessons can teach us how to stop the endless cycle of war that humanity has been in for a long time. Every time we are at peace, there is always something going to trigger another endless, pointless war that will just end in thousands of deaths. In a research article written by Stefan Ignar Lindberg at the University of Gothenburg entitled Dictatorships Advancing Globally, he states, our measurements show that the closed autocracies have increased from 25 to 30 countries globally. Dictatorships are now on the rise around the world. Today, 5.4 billion people, 70%, live in dictatorships. This is why we need to solve this problem, because it doesn't just affect one small third world country, it's affecting almost every single person on the planet. The next step for solving this issue is having a peace treaty with one of the more hostile countries, but a lot of these countries like their governmental control and like having complete control over their citizens because they see it being the only way.